just having this collection is so inspiring in terms of, without even consciously realizing it, having all that reference material physically nearby and being able to kind of take a break, look at all of it and see thousands of ideas that have come to final decisions and are sitting right in front of you, you kind of just feel like okay, I think I know what to do. There's so many great templates and references here, and I love that part about the collection. There's another part where just, I don't know, as a fan, it's so cool to feel like you have like a representation or a piece of the thing that you're into. It says a lot, I think, about a lot of collectors. What they're into is always reflected by these great collections, whether it's, you know, the characters or the universe or a theme, or, you know, even just going for like something different. There's always so many cool reasons, and I feel like that's kind of what brings me to the table too. I'm like, I like a bunch of different stuff. I can have it all in one place, and seeing it definitely geeks me out, and it's really fun to share because I think it makes people feel the same way when they see it. Hi, I'm Phill Gonzales. I am an artist. I've been doing digital art for a really long time. 20 years of that has probably been in the video game industry, and I am a total hobbyist for several different things. I love to build models, collect figures, do art in my spare time, and play a lot of games. So that's kind of me. For work, I'm currently working for video game companies, and what I've been doing the past 20 years is usually creating digital artwork specifically. So that means getting into programs like Photoshop, 3D model programs, and generating art for games, whether that's a 3D model, a texture, or some other kind of game asset. I've played a lot of games for a long time, and when I was young, I learned how to mod games and start getting my own artwork in the game, and that's really driven a ton of what I do now, is just learning how to make different things, getting different ideas interpreted into 3D, and trying my best to make really cool interactive art. When I got started as an artist, I was like a really little kid. I grew up on a farm, and there was tons of animals and tractors and stuff like that, and just inspired the heck out of me. And when the weather is bad on the farm and it's raining, you're usually stuck indoors. So when I would be indoors during these times, I would be reading a ton of books, and I got into Lord of the Rings, Dune, started reading a ton of comic books, and really started drawing a lot of the stuff that was influenced me in my spare time. Yeah, I've been more or less just messing around with it since I was a little kid, and now I guess I've done it long enough I can get paid to do it, and it supports me, and I've lucked out that I got to do it this long. I'm really still like big on paper and pen. Like, I have a clipboard full of printer paper and Bic pens, which is always like my baseline go-to. I don't know why pencil, I just don't mess with it. It's just like, let's commit, let's go all in on pen. When I get from the sketching phase, usually I am either in Photoshop and translate my 2D drawing skills on paper to something digital and have a lot more control over the final graphical result. If I'm not drawing on the computer, I'm usually then making 3D in a similar sense, making artwork digitally, but making it from several different angles, looking at things in a more interactive sense in terms of, I'm going to need to put this 3D model, once I'm done making it in a program, into another program like a video game engines, and make sure that the artwork I'm making is actually a functional game art asset. It's so amazing to see that cumulative knowledge, energy, talent, expertise result in something that actually exists, whether it's an image or an object. And to me, that is so fascinating, because you can look at the things other people are making, if they're sculpting, if they're drawing, and you might have similar influences, but the end result can be completely different. And I love that. I love that people can have the same idea and we still get different results. And that's what's so inspiring about creative minds, is we're all seeing the same things. We're coming up with different ways to make something out of those ideas. And when we share them, that's when I feel like there's that connection. There's that like, oh, we all see it now. And I love that part of making anything. In terms of influences, Frank Frazetta, James Bama, McGinnis, there's so many just amazing people who are painting not only book covers, but the covers to the movies I was watching, the covers to the packaging I was buying, whether it was a video game or a toy. Just these amazing guys who could render, and that blew my mind, that you could make something completely fantastical and made up look real. I started getting into Marvel and DC Comics, but Image started doing stuff where those guys were deliberately breaking out of their creative boundaries and really ripping and tearing into what they wanted to do. And I started looking into a lot of what Dark Horse was publishing and got really deep into Mignola, Hellboy, Jeff Darrow, what he did on Hard Boiled, Frank Miller's Sin City work, and that really made me go, I need to level up because I want to be that good in my own personal work. That's what inspires me majorly on an art front. On a personal front, I've had the fortune of working with a few people who are just amazing fabricators, developers, and workers. My dad is one of them, who's worked in construction his whole life, and he got me in spots where I worked with other people who were also extremely technical and engineering minded. I got to meet people from my parents who were animators and working creative people who showed me that, like, you know, there's a lot of technical work that goes into making this, but that's where you get to learn the skills that allow you to make something more interesting, fun, and creative. And part of my collecting journey, I think around the time, like late 90s, I was going to San Jose a lot, where the Gundam merchandise was really starting to come over stateside, and a lot of the model kits that were being made just geeked me out. I've built model kits off and on, cars and stuff like that, but I think the Bandai level of kit building really just got me at another level of motivation and inspiration for model making and minis. When I was in middle school, a friend of mine showed me a rule book for Games Workshop for the first time, and it blew my mind. I was like, this is the coolest. I just read Lord of the Rings. Everything was just like the nines. They painted it. They'd taken great pictures of it. It was an awesome, polished like rule book, and that had always been kind of like lingering in my mind. I'm like, one day when I get my collecting life together, I want to try this. I want to get into this hobby. I want to get good at it. I've probably been working at this for about 10 years, just learning different ways to paint, learning different ways to build, getting results kind of the way I want them, and that's what's going on here. I get these things spun up, and I think this batch here I've probably been working on for 3 months, but it's a really good hobby. It gets me off the computer. It gets me doing stuff with my hands, and traditionally, again, I really enjoy it. I collect a lot of toys. Right now I'm collecting a lot more miniature-based stuff, but it's generally action figures, miniatures, sometimes games, and then art books, and every now and then a statue. When I was a kid, I'd be playing outside, and like it was dinosaurs. Like I was just like, give me dinosaurs. And I was like a little kid, and I knew all their names, and you know, if there was a species or a type of dinosaur I didn't have, I'm like, yo, I need that Styracosaurus over here. My grandparents, who being from San Jose, and they had a lot more just cool collectible stuff to spoil their grandkid with, they saw this and they're like, oh, you'll probably love this, and they got me into Dino Riders. And the way they did that, they were just like, we'll just buy almost all of them, and as a kid you're like, ah! Little did I know, like, that would totally put a bug in my like psyche, and I just love kind of like the completionist aspect of some collections, and having them kind of gathered up and be like, dude, like, I saw it in the magazine, I saw it in the Sears catalog or whatever, and like, there it is, I love it. So it started early. It got me pretty early on. I have Metal Gear Rex, which Metal Gear is one of my favorite games, and the Rex figure I have was just something I never thought would get made into like a figure, and when it did get translated, I was like, that geeks me out. I love having that in my collection. There's some stuff that's mostly nostalgic, like old metal lunchbox from Gremlins, which, you know, as a kid I thought that was the coolest thing I ever saw. So there's a few of those moments, but I think the best one is probably that Krulos down there from Dino Riders, because he came a long way to get here, and it's a funny story, and it just kind of like, I'm stoked to have it. If this all burned down, I could probably buy everything back, but I'd be bummed about some of the stuff that would be gone, and that would be one of them. There's some stuff in here that's like insanely costly, and it shouldn't be, but it never really bugs me. I guess it's just kind of like in terms of value, I think like the vintage stuff that's still in great shape, like the Dino Riders, I'm super stoked to have that, because I feel other collectors, when they see it, like there's always a pause if they recognize it, and I'm totally geeked because there's like, what? And it's such an OG thing, and now that it's aging and becoming even more nostalgic, when I get to share it with people, it's like that's always the one that they're just like, what? And I love that. So the display cases are kind of they're kind of something that happened because as I got into collecting more and more, and then move out and get my own career and job, like a collection becomes kind of a weird thing I'm bringing around with me. And when I'm working in these offices with all these other creative folks in video games and cinematics, like everyone has something near their desk, something cool that like they geeked out on and they collected. And you know, we're all doing this, and with my collection, it just happened like, you know, I have a Gundam collection over here, I have an Aliens and Predator collection, and sometimes they're on display at work, sometimes they're just in storage. It got to a point where there was so much stuff in storage, I was like, I wish I could either like offload this or have it all displayed. And that's when, you know, instead of collecting more, I'm like, I should really just hunker down and get some nice display cases, like so they're not getting dusty all the time, so they're set up in a cool way, so they're lit so you can see them all like in a larger scope next to each other. So like never would have guessed that this is where it would have ended up, but having it like presented nice like this, totally love it. And if you can do it, like I know a lot of folks who've also gotten their cases set up, and it makes them so happy. It becomes so much easier to share too. I am making stuff in 3D and 3D printing it, not really selling anything, but probably get my act together and throw some stuff on Thingiverse, because I love making like pieces to complement my collection, and kind of I'm heading in a direction that's inevitably going to be probably me making dioramas, because with the display cases, with the character figures and stuff, I feel like that's probably the next wormhole I'm going to go down to, is like plussing up my display so it's got cooler dioramas for the different themes or logo placards. I definitely think that's probably going to be the next itch that gets scratched. I do sell some graphic stuff on Redbubble, but it's mostly just like t-shirts and things that, you know, I'll kind of be in a wild mood and be like, I just want a shirt with this like logo on it, and I'll go off and make that, and I put it up online so anyone who wants to also partake is welcome to. I'm on social media, please feel welcome to follow me. It's not that exciting, I'm just doing nerd stuff, but if you follow Phill.Gonzales on Instagram, that's me, and from there you can find a link to my ArtStation page. You can find a link to I have another Instagram account which is just like all my artwork, like drawings, models, stuff like that. So I post stuff randomly, and welcome to follow and drop a comment. I have a lot of side projects that I slowly work on them in my spare time, and I'm really hoping to have a couple of those in 20 years in a state where I'm just like enjoying maybe a sandbox game that's designed around stuff that no one else would make into a mainstream game, and it's just me farting around. I have a car I'm working on that I very much hope is done in 20 years. But more or less, I hope I'm still doing a lot of the same things. I really enjoy, you know, the hobby of painting and doing model and miniature work. I hope I'm still doing that, and I'll follow Phill, knock on wood, hopefully still drawing and making art. So go from there.